We are pleased to be joined by one of the great conservatives of our time, Edwin Meese, an advisor to President Ronald Reagan before becoming his attorney general. He was a member of the cabinet and the National Security Council. Mr. Meese currently holds the Ronald Reagan Chair for Public Policy at the Heritage Foundation and is also chairman of Heritage's Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. And Mr. Meese, thank you so much for being with us here on Newsmax TV today.
Glad to be with you.
Well, the Supreme Court upheld the individual mandate under Congress's taxing power. They struck down the Medicaid expansion provision in a 5-4 decision. What is your reaction to the ruling?
Well, it's an unfortunate ruling in the sense that it fails to uphold the constitutional protection of liberty and indeed allows the federal government to meddle more and more into the daily lives of our citizens. I think it will have tragic results in terms of what happens in the country. There's no question that it will raise premiums for health insurance. It will be a massive increase in taxes. It will drive up spending and debt as far as the federal government is concerned. It certainly undermines the doctor-patient relationship, as well as we've already seen. It tramples on religious liberty. And as I mentioned earlier, it definitely expands the role of government in our lives. So I think it's a tragic result. Of course, the tragedy was the original ramming down the throats of the people, this legislation by a Congress, no member of which had ever read the entire bill. When you have some 2,700 pages of legislation and nobody has read it, you have all kinds of unintended consequences and as yet undiscovered penalties and problems with the bill.
Were you surprised or shocked that Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the more liberal justices?
I was indeed surprised that the Chief Justice upheld this particular provision of the law, particularly when it was not argued by the government either at the time that the bill was passed nor later before the court that it was in fact a tax. As a matter of fact, before the court, they tried to have it both ways. Well, the court went along with this, and so it's inexplicable as to how they read the mandate penalty as a tax because it was a misreading of the statute. On that statutory ruling, the court held that the mandate penalty is not a tax for purposes of the Tax Anti-Injunction Act, but is a tax under Congress's taxing power, an ambivalence that is hard to understand. So I was really surprised that the court, and particularly the Chief Justice, arrived at this decision.
House Speaker Boehner is moving forward with repeal. Without majority in the Senate and a Democrat in the White House, how confident can the GOP be about prospects for repeal?
Well, I think the prospects for repeal are excellent. The only question is, what is the timing? Can it be done when you have a president in the White House who is responsible for this tragedy? And when you have a majority in the Senate that has never been cooperative in terms of upholding the Constitution. So it's just a matter of time, whether it's done now or whether it is done sometime in a new session of the Congress.
Now, what, if any, options do states have now? Can states refuse to implement the law?
Well, the states do not have a requirement, I think, in most cases, to implement the law until sometime in the future. Under the provisions of the original act. Certainly there is no reason for the states to go forward now on anything they don't have to do, and anything that they may have done in the past should be subject to rescission as a part of any new legislation repealing the act.
Parts of the law go into effect in 2014. If the GOP is unable to repeal before then, does the U.S. then, in effect, become a socialist nation with this legislation?
Well, if things worked out, both in the November election and then ultimately in the legislature in 2013 and prior to the full implementation of the law, certainly this legislation, if totally in effect, would put us on the road towards a greater socialistic paradigm as far as our national condition is concerned.
Now, the SCOTUS decision, does this become the defining issue of the 2012 campaign? Will it energize the base and independents and maybe put some wind in the sails of Mitt Romney's presidential campaign?
Well, we know that the overwhelming majority of Americans are opposed to the Obamacare legislation. And so I certainly think that this would be an important matter for discussion and for argument during the election campaign. However, it is only one of a number of things that are moving the country in the wrong direction. And so but I think it definitely would be symbolic of what is wrong with the current direction of our nation as it will be discussed in the campaign.
Last question, Mr. Meese. Ronald Reagan, you knew him well. When it comes to the path he put this country on, or the direction he had us headed in, how far off that path are we today?
I think we are considerably off the path that Ronald Reagan put us on during his 8 years in office. He believed in lower taxes across the board. He believed in less regulation and less unnecessary regulation by the federal government. He believed in stable monetary policies. He believed in reducing the growth of federal spending, all of which is exactly opposite to the direction in which the country is going today. So I think that there's no question that he would be very much opposed to what has happened over the course of the last 3.5 years.
Attorney General Edwin Meese, thanks so much for being with us today. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you here on Newsmax TV.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.